I'm so happy we could have so many people here with us today. I am Kristen Sorek West. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Executive Education at the Yale School of Management. As I kick things off, a few housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar and the recording will be distributed afterwards to all registrants. We are expecting this webinar to last about 60 minutes. And we encourage you to send us questions and comments using the chat and the Q&A features. A couple of my executive education colleagues are on the call with us, Rachel Mileto and Joanne Legler. We're going to answer some questions in the chat and live, but for more robust, lengthier questions, we have time reserved at the end to answer them. In our presentation today, we have a lot of great material to cover, and we want to make sure we just get through it all. So today we are exploring something truly powerful, game theory. As I've come to learn, because it's not my particular area of expertise, game theory isn't about predicting the future, it's about shaping it. It's about understanding how to influence the competitive landscape so your organization comes out ahead. I'm pleased to host this webinar with Professor William Putsis. He brings a wonderful blend of marketing expertise, economic insight, and strategic thinking to everything he does. As a faculty member in many of our executive education programs, including Leading Business Model Innovation and our beloved Yale Global Executive Leadership Program, he's dedicated to making sophisticated concepts accessible and immediately useful. The applications for both programs, Leading Business Model Innovation and the Yale Global Executive Leadership Program, are open. And as we proceed during the webinar, I encourage you to explore the program pages. If you're inspired by the material covered today, you might want to continue your professional development with us here on campus. As Bill and I talked about his work in the Leading Business Model program, we were inspired to deliver a webinar on a tool leaders use when reevaluating their business model for long-term competitive advantage. The most successful business model innovations aren't just creative, they're strategically designed to be difficult for competitors to copy or counter effectively. That's game theory in action. You're not just optimizing your model, you're anticipating how the entire competitive landscape will reconfigure around your move. So settle in, bring your curiosity and questions, and let's dive into this. Professor Putsis, Bill, the floor is yours.
Kristen, thank you. I'm going to share my screen with everyone so we have the slides up here and go full screen. You all hear me okay? Let me just take off the subtitles. All good? Awesome. I'm really excited to be here this morning. If you don't know and haven't been there, that's beautiful Evans Hall, the home of the Yale School of Management. And I'm going to just jump in really quickly that I want to say that what we're doing today can take a week. And we're going to do it in about 45 minutes. I'll be available, by the way, when we're done with this portion, and we'll be available after, and I can stay past noon East Coast time if anyone wants to. I love doing this. To me, this is exciting, but it should all be about intuition first. It needs to be something that's applicable because I believe really strongly game theory is something that can give you a competitive edge in the marketplace. It involves thinking strategically every day in everything that we do. I'm going to start a couple places with a preamble before we jump into things. And I want to say that today is going to be about the intuition. When we go live, I'm known for wearing a tie. The reason why I wear a tie live or here is I call it the David Faber rule. David Faber calls it on CNBC. He calls it the other people's money rule. He wears a tie, as he says, out of respect for other people's money when he talks about other people's money. You're giving an hour of your time this morning, and if we're live, usually I wear a loose tie because not only do I want to signal some respect for the fact that you came here to spend a day, a week, or whatever the time that you've given to us, but it's usually a loose tie because it's going to involve working. When we do the game theory session that I'm about to talk through in the next 45 minutes with you all live, when we do it in session at either Weigelt or LBMI or any of the sessions we do at Yale, we usually have you actually engage in a session where you apply it to your business, not just learning the intuition. But I believe really strongly that you need to understand the intuition. And in principle, game theory is really intuitive. It's based on some advanced and heavy duty mathematics. I do a lot of my research over the years using what I'll call the empirical models of game theory. focusing in on the empirical applications using real data and fairly advanced statistics to estimate how firms do and should behave. But what you do in practice, it is based on three principles that we all could use. And my hope is by the time we're done in the next 40 minutes or so, you understand the intuition behind game theory and then ultimately can then translate it to what we do. What we won't do in this, I'm going to go really quickly to tell a very long story, but the short version of the longest story is I'm going to paraphrase a colleague of mine, Jared Blake, who used to teach at Harvard. And you know how you do those evaluations on courses at the end? Well, he always tells a story where he had a course evaluation from a student at the end of a course that he was reading. And the course evaluation said, if I had but 1 hour to live, I'd want to spend that 1 hour with Professor Blake. And he thought, I didn't know I had such an impact on my students. Then he flipped the page over and kept reading, and the person went on because Professor Blake makes 1 hour seem like eternity. Now, I hope we don't make the next hour seem like eternity to you all. I think it'll be fun. We're going to do some exercises, and hopefully at the end of this hour, the intuition is there that were you to do it live, everything you do is based on that intuition, and you'll be much better at applying game theory day to day. Okay, so with that, I think, and I believe really strongly, companies think many steps ahead. Game theory is not about predicting the future, as Kristen said. Game theory is all about changing the decision calculus of your rival. So it's in their interest to do what's in your best interest. Think about that. Game theory is about changing the decision calculus of your rival. So when they do something, it's in your best interest because you've thought ahead. So every company, if they're going to do any sort of game theory exercise, you're talking about thinking many steps ahead. Real quick version, we're in a session. I'll show you a video in a second. We're in a session with Larry Page. My colleague Jeff Sonnenfeld was running it. And Jeff at the time had asked Larry Page in front of this audience, it was 2017, what are you going to do with the $37 billion of cash you just received? Long story where the background comes. And Larry Page said, I'm going to solve the traffic light problem. He's going to spend $37 billion on traffic lights was his answer. Three times in the next 10 minutes, Jeff asked him something that had nothing to do with traffic lights, and his answer was traffic lights. He was obsessed with traffic lights. I'm going to argue he wasn't thinking about traffic lights at all. This is what he was thinking about. So let me play the video really quickly. It's a silly video, but it'll set up the thinking that I want us to do for the next 30, 40 minutes. All right, I know that silly video is silly, but it illustrates the point that he wasn't thinking about traffic lights at all. He was thinking about what if we had a world where there were no traffic lights? What if we had autonomous vehicles that could interact like you see in that silly video right there? Well, that's kind of what we want to do with the session that we're about to work through, what we want to do with game theory. If you look at the two charts in front of you, the two figures, the one on the right represents what we would want to do in game theory. We want to think ahead and then work back from where we want to be. I always call this future market thinking. Think of where you want to be at the end of the strategy and work back from that rather than what we typically do, the figure on the left, incremental thinking. I still remember it was a conversation when my son was in high school and we were arguing, debating about something, and he was getting mad and frustrated because I wanted to win the next point and he wanted to win the next point. That's the figure on the left. It hit me then what game theory really is about everything that we do. I thought for a second, I stopped. What do I want to happen at the end of this conversation? What I wanted at the end of the conversation is us to come to a reasonable place, for him to realize that really his vision of what he's trying to espouse is respected, that people have respectful conversations and can debate and still come out at a good place, right? And my tenor, my tone, my argument changed instantly to think about where we're going at the end of this conversation rather than how I win the next point. Think about everything we're about to walk through as being just that in the context of what we want to do inside of game theory. Okay, with that as a background, there are three main tenets of game theory: commitment, credible threat, and the one that usually isn't talked about much, but I think is the most important, is this notion of order matters. It matters when you go. There is almost never an optimal strategy that has you waiting. Always go first. Commitment, credible threat, and order matters. And so what we'll do in the next few minutes is we're going to walk through something called the ultimatum game, show a couple videos about a show in the UK, a show called the Golden Balls that was actually replicated in the US, and then talk a little bit about how we take a simultaneous game, turn it into a sequential one to our advantage. When we're done, I'm actually going to show you two real life examples of game theory exercise that I've done with companies. A little bit of background on me. I do a lot of game theory in my research, at least on the empirical side of things, as I mentioned earlier, but I work most often with companies on game theory. So we'll understand their competitive environment. And I want to use at least two of those examples, disguised, of course, in the session at the end. If you're part of the sessions that I do, certainly, and most of the programs that we do here at SOM, they involve applying this. So in LBMI, my colleague Sang has come up with a couple of really good cases that you'll be applying it to when you all meet me at Weigelt. For those of you who will be part of it, or those of you who have been part of it, we do it over the evening between one afternoon session and the following next morning. Okay, so let's take these one at a time. Commitment, credible threats, and order matters. Before we do that, however, I want to note that part of the reason why I argue this is so important as a topic is that it has increasingly been an integral part of what's being presented at boards. Two quick stories, can do it often in more depth when we're live and have more time. A company called Atcore, they had gone to their board. They're the largest manufacturer, at least they were at the time, of what they call raceways, I call conduits, in the United States in the building space. And they had been presenting a new strategy to the board. Back then, it was Jack Welch, going back a few years, of course, and A.G. Lafley were on the board. They both turned it down. And Jack Welch in particular had asked the leadership team, John Williamson, their CEO, have you gamed this out? If you game it out, then come back to us. I'll think very seriously about giving you funding. And actually, they then came to me. We did a game theory, ultimately got the board approval for it. The second is this company called Knauf down at the bottom. They were going into the board for approval for a $300 million spend. The board wanted them to game it out. They did in great detail over a matter of months, and only then were they given board approval for it. So I want to be really clear that this is not just a way of you to think about your business and gain competitive advantage. For those of you in the C-suite, those of you in leadership teams, you're now increasingly being expected to present it at the board. And by the way, those of you who aren't in the C-suite or in the senior executive level inside of your organizations, if it's coming to them, it's coming to you. And so let's talk about what levels this is done at. First, every day, we think strategically. By the way, one of the best books out there, people often ask me what book to buy, at least where I'd start if you haven't already. My colleague Barry Nailbuff, it's an older book, but it's fantastic, Thinking Strategically. It talks about how we use game theory in every day. It's how we interact, like that example I talked about with my son in some respects. And then it can be usually where we apply it is what I'll call the micro or the macro level. So how do we decide on tomorrow's price? How do we decide on changes in capacity levels? Or it could be a big picture strategy. Boeing could have game theory sessions, and I've done some with them, that have lasted up to 10, 15, as much as 20 years. So note that all of this can be done at multiple levels, but they all involve those three main things: commitment, credible threat, and order matters. So let's take them one at a time. The mindset here, I'm going to go through this, something I do live, and I want you to think a little bit about the mindset in the next few examples. I often will, if we're live, and imagine we're live, hold up some cards. And can't usually see it on here. I have 10 red cards and I have 10 black cards. Imagine you're in the audience and there are 10 of you. And I hand out one red card to each of you. And I tell you that anyone who holds one red card and one black card is going to get $100 from Kristen, who introduced us. She has $1,000 in her hand because There are 10 black, and you all have, respectively, each of you have one red card. So think about it. How much do you have in your hand, each of you, each of the 10 of you, holding each one red card? Well, you have nothing until you share your red card with me. How much do I have in my hand with my 10 black cards? Nothing, right? If you think about it, we got to make a deal. So imagine I come to one of you and I say, I'll give you $10 for your red card. Presumably, you know I'll turn it into 100. And so I imagine you'd say no until we somewhere come close to 50-50. You get 50, I get 50, might be an expected reasonable outcome. The question I'll throw out is, how do I make more money? And the answer is a really simple one, and that is I tear up the black card. Now I just threw it in the air. I have 9 black cards. Collectively, you have 10. One of you are going to be frozen out. That's kind of like the money version of musical chairs that we played as kids. All right, now think about this a little bit. Imagine I do that. The question I often ask in a group, imagine I've torn up the card. I have now 9. You collectively have 10. How might you respond to what I do? People often say, well, maybe we all could get together. And when we get together, we negotiate as one across our the 9 cards that we have. But this is a business example, right? And collusion is illegal. Um, then I ask, why is that the wrong question? And this is what illustrates the mindset of game theory. The right question should have been, what could each of you have done before I tear up that card to make it so that I don't want to tear up the card in the first place? Think about it. If you individually and as a group had agreed before I tore up that card that I might tear up a card, so what do I do? And so you each individually and collectively have decided or announced that the results of any negotiation done in private would immediately be made public. If that were the case, I know when I tore up the card, the result of that negotiation would be immediately made public. You all then would know I only have 9 cards and there are back to 9 of you. I'd have no incentive to tear up the card because I'd tear up $100 for nothing. Think about that as we walk through it. Usually we have questions and answers on this. Given the time constraints, we'll hold questions to the end. But the example here says it's not about how you react to my tearing up the card. Is how do you, before I tear up the card, make it so that I don't want to tear up the card? That's really what we're trying to do with game theory. Change the incentives of your rival so they do what's in your best interest, or at least do what's not in your disinterest. All right, so let's build on that a little bit. And I want to give a couple of examples. My colleague Barry, who I've mentioned a few times, has written some pretty detailed mathematical pieces on game theory. But he went on 2020 a number of years ago and said he's going to help use principles of game theory to help people lose weight. And what he said, he's going to take, I believe it was 6 men and 6 women. I may get the numbers wrong, but a bunch of men, a bunch of women, 6 men, 6 women in this example. And he's going to ask them to commit to how much weight they're going to lose. And he's going to get a time frame. And so they're going to lose X number of pounds in Y number of weeks. That's the commitment. The credible threat is he took 8.5 by 10 glossies of the men in skimpy Speedo bathing suits and the women in string bikinis, and he threatened to show the 8.5 by 10 glossies on national television when this show aired if they didn't lose the specified or agreed to committed number of pounds in the number of weeks that they committed to. That was the credible threat. How many of those do you think lost the weight? They all did. Commitment, credible threat. I'll give you another one, and there are a few of them that I often like to give. One is an example of my son again when he was younger. He used to try and negotiate with me. He said, "Daddy, can I have 3 cookies?" And I said, "You could have 1." Smart kid tries to say, "Well, how about we come in the middle? I get 2." And I said, "No, you don't get any." Next time he tries to negotiate. He said, "Daddy, can I have 4 cookies?" Think he'd come in the middle. And I said, "Okay, you can have 2." Then he says, "Well, how about we split the difference, get 3?" He got 1. Every time he learns that when he negotiates for a cookie, he gets less. So what happens when next time he says, "Daddy, can I have 2 cookies?" I said, "You get 1." He says, "Okay." That's the notion of a credible threat because I could take it away at any point. Now he's 28 and there's no credible threats out there at all. I was on a plane, true story, from Raleigh to Chicago a number of years ago. And there's this 8-year-old kid wreaking havoc, roughly 8 years old. And the father was sitting there reading a newspaper And the mother was couldn't control her. Finally, the father, it's on RJ, so literally in the aisle next to me, takes the girl, looks her straight in the eye, gets down on his knees so they're eye to eye, and says to her, "If you don't behave, I'm going to put you out on the wing." The little girl thinks, what are the chances he's going to put me out on the wing? And she goes back to doing what she was doing. The father goes back to the newspaper. Nothing changed. That wasn't a credible threat. So note this notion of commitment and credible threat. If you ever seen the movie John Nash, it's in A Beautiful Mind starring Russell Crowe, much of the modern game theory came out of the work of John Nash back in World War II. Okay, so often what I do in session, something called the ultimatum game. So try this with someone you know. Imagine you're going to split $100. We're not going to do it live here. We're going to show a video example of it. And the next example is going to illustrate the principles that we're going to build on. Okay. And by the way, I know I'm going through this in light speed. As I said, usually this is multiple days. I'm trying to go through this to give you the setting of some of the things that'll be fun that we often do live. In the ultimatum game, imagine giving $100 to split with someone, and you have to offer them one shot, how much you're going to give them out of that $100, and they can say yes or no. So imagine you say, I'm going to give you $5 to the other person you're doing this exercise with, which means you'd keep 95. If they say yes, they get 5, you get 95. If they say no, you both get 0. So how much would you offer to them? Think about how you'd play this game. If you're thinking about it, if you offer them 50, they'd probably say yes. But can you give them less? Can you get more? If you offer them 5, rationally, they're still $5 richer than they would be if you didn't offer them anything. So rationally, they should take it, but often they don't because they don't want to be treated unfairly. Let me show you one example how this plays out. The next 2 videos, the second video is the one that's going to matter, and then we'll kind of get into the process a little bit of what you have to think about with doing this. The example I have here is something called Golden Balls. It's a real show involving real money. The first video with the guy you see there will play out. It's going to set up the second video, which is going to show you game theory in action. So let me play the first one, and then I'll show you the second one. The second one, you can barely see at the bottom of the screen, the gentleman in the brown shirt, Nicholas, who's a master at game theory. And I want you to watch these and tell me what you think. Tell me you think who's going to steal. The game will be laid out by the host as you watch here.
Okay, this is serious life-changing money. Your jackpot today is £100,150. You have one final decision to make. Easy decision. We're now going to play split or steal. I know you're the last 2 people in the country I have to explain this to, but you have 2 final golden balls. You each have a golden ball with the word split written inside. You each have a golden ball with the word steal written inside. You will make a conscious choice of choosing the split or the steal ball. If you both choose the split ball, you split today's jackpot of £100,150 and you go home with £50,075. If one of you splits and one of you steals, whoever chooses the steal ball will go home with £100,150. And the person chooses the split ball goes home with nothing. If you both choose the steal ball, you go home with nothing. Okay. Before I ask you to choose, I want you to look at your 2 golden balls and make sure you know which is the split ball and which is the steal ball. This is very important. Make sure you don't show each other. Before I ask you to choose, I think you have some talking to do to each other.
Stephen, I just hope they weren't puppy dog tears and they were real tears and you were genuinely going to split that money.
I am going to split this. That's just 50,000. I'm just, it's unbelievable. I'm very, very happy to go on with 50,000. If I stole off you, every single person there would run over here and lynch me.
There was no way I could I mean, everyone who knew me would just be disgusted if I stop.
When people watch this, they're not going to believe it.
Please.
I can look you in the, Sarah, I can look you straight in the eye and tell you I am going to split. I swear down to you, I am going to split.
Okay. This is serious money. It is. Sarah, Steve, choose either the split or the steel ball now. Hold it up.
We're going on with 50 grand each. I promise you that.
Split or steel?
All right, I'm gonna stop there and now I'll go to the next one. I did not see that coming, but that's not what game theory is about. That's just the back and forth negotiation. This next video you're about to see has actually been both of these players have been interviewed in a show on NPR. You can Google it and watch it. It's out on YouTube. The guy on the right, Nicholas, I'd argue, is a master in game theory. Absolutely brilliant. I don't know how anyone chose a strategy after this other than what he does. And so I want you to think about why what Nicholas, the guy with the brown shirt on the right, why what he does is so brilliant. And I'll fast forward through this so that we, you don't need the explanation again.
And the other chooses 13,600. But if you both choose the steel ball, you leave today's game with what you came with. Nothing. It's the ultimate test of faith, trust, and let's face it, greed. Take a moment to look at the balls in front of you so you know that obviously keep them concealed from each other. Just have a look.
No, shoot, sorry about that. Think about why what he's about to say is brilliant.
It's the easiest choice, but the most difficult one. What I want you to do is to spend half a minute talking to each other about what you both should do. Nick, Abraham.
Ibrahim, I want you to trust me. 100%, I'm going to pick the steel ball.
Sorry, you're going to...
I'm going to choose the steel ball.
You're going to take...
I want you to do split, and I promise you that I will split the money with you.
But after you took steel?
Yeah.
You're going to take steel?
Yeah.
I'm going to take split?
Yeah.
So you take the money?
And I will split it with you.
After the show?
Yeah. I promise you I'll do that. If you do steel, we both walk away with nothing. I'm telling you 100% I'm going to do it.
I appreciate that. Right, I'll give you another alternative. Why don't we just both pick split?
I'm not going to pick split. I'm going to steal, Ibrahim. Honestly, 100% I'm going to steal.
It's in your nature to steal.
No, I'm honest, and I'm going to tell you.
You're an honest man.
I am. That's why I'm telling you I'm going to steal. If you do split, then I will split the money.
I can't see myself doing that.
Okay, well, I'm going to steal, so we're going to leave with nothing.
Where's your brains coming from? I can't work out.
I know that I'm a decent guy and I will split the money with you.
Well, we should just both split then.
No, I'm going to do steal.
There is no legal
No, I know there is. I know there is.
for him to give you the money.
Of course. If I gave you my word, now let me tell you what my word means.
Okay.
My father once said to me, a man who doesn't keep his word is not a man. He's not worth nothing. Not worth a dollar.
I agree.
So,
Ibrahim, I'm going to steal. So you've got the choice. You either steal and we both walk away with nothing, because you know I've told you my intention and I've told you that I will split the money with you, Ibrahim.
if I gave you my word that I was going to split, I would split. And you're going to take steal. So,
The only way you can guarantee to walk away with 6,800
it's by
is to
sharing.
guarantee that you both put the split ball in. And I do now have to push you for a decision. It's a tough one.
We've lost it. We've lost everything.
Okay. Last then.
We're walking away with no money because you're an idiot.
No, that's not.
You're an idiot. That's not right. You're an idiot. You're an idiot. That's what you are.
This can go on all night, and these people have got to get up for breakfast. Nick, choose split or steal. Abraham, choose split or steal. Now, please. Choose a ball.
Right, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go with you.
Okay,
I'm going to go.
I promise you I will split it.
You cannot change your balls now. Split or steal? Yeah, congratulations, you're both split and each received £6,800.
So I want you to think about that. I know it's a little bit long on the video, but think about what Nicholas did. He put this gentleman, Ibrahim, in the position that assuming he wanted the money, he had one choice to do what Nicholas wanted him to do, choose split. That's what we try and do with game theory. I'm going to talk about how in a minute. And if we go live, whether it be LBMI or ENY Galp or any of the other programs that I teach inside of this SOM, we do this live where you apply to your business. But think about it. Ibrahim had one choice if he wanted the money, and that's to choose the split. So he did what Nicholas wanted him to do. That's what we're trying to do. Now think about the following. Both these players were interviewed in that NPR, and Ibrahim right here said in that interview, he went into this negotiation 100% certain, no matter what the other person said, that he would choose the steel ball. He was going in to choose steel. What Nicholas did made him change his mind because it was no longer in his best interest to choose steel. That's the intuition of what we try and do with decision trees. Now, again, game theory is on multiple levels, mathematical, can do it empirically. In business, it's typically done with fairly advanced but elaborate decision trees. If you've done decision tree analysis, you can do game theory for your organizations in practice. Varying degrees of complexity, I'll go past, we won't want to see that again. So hopefully that intuition makes sense. I'm going to give a stylized example, and this is one that I'm going to go through fairly quickly. We'll go through in great detail when we do it in live sessions, but I call it the conditional doesn't equal the unconditional doesn't equal the conditional. That is, order matters. What's optimal for, think about what I'm about to say, what's optimal for my rival to do unconditionally means I haven't done anything. So before I act, what is optimal for my rival to do unconditionally is by definition not the same as what is optimal for my rival to do conditional on my having done something. My doing something changes their world. If I decide to increase output, there's less output available for them to sell. And so how do those dynamics play out? And I want to use an example. It's a fairly complicated one, but I think we can go through it pretty quickly. It's one from Dixit and Elba, the book that I suggested. If you haven't already, great book from a number of years ago, but hasn't lost its relevance. Imagine there are two firms, in this case, Boeing, Airbus. Boeing's been my largest customer over many years. They have a choice to make. Both firms are coming up with a new plane and deciding whether it's a twin engine, narrow body, or a wide body. Both making the same decision. If you think this is too stylized, it was 2013. I was with Boeing when they were deciding on making an all-composite 777, the ones that's just being released now, or blended hull, and Airbus at the same time making the same exact decision with the A350. So imagine, for the sake of argument, that if both firms produced a narrow body, Boeing would get 18 billion in revenue, Airbus would get 12 billion. Now note that we don't know this typically with certainty, but we could usually tell if this is going to be a good or a bad outcome for us. It's called a payout matrix. Just think about the logic, take it on face value, and imagine we knew with certainty, we don't with certainty, but we usually do know, that if both firms choose a narrow body, that's roughly how well the firms would do. Imagine on the flip side, if Boeing chose a wide body, Airbus chooses a narrow body, Boeing sales would go up, but Airbus's would go up significantly more. Now note, that's actually a bad outcome for the Boeing company, even though sales went up. And the reason why, in that bottom left, they have a third of the market. And you have a third of the market, your costs are at a disadvantage. You have an extremely difficult time competing in a world where your biggest competitor is producing twice the amount of you. It's a really steep experience curve. Costs come down with volume. So just take this at given. And we'll entertain questions later, of course. If, on the other hand, wrong way, on the other hand, Boeing produces a narrow body, Airbus chooses a wide body, it's the reverse. Boeing sales go up to 70 billion, They have 2/3 of the market. The cost of production is lower for Boeing. They're at a huge advantage. And imagine both produce a wide body. We're somewhere in the middle. The question is, what's optimal for Boeing? Boeing's optimal point is this. They want Airbus to choose a wide body and they produce a narrow body, both happening at the same time. So how does Boeing get Airbus to do what it wants? How does Boeing get Airbus to choose a wide body? The CEO of Boeing calls up the CEO of Airbus. Hey, it's better for us if you guys produce a wide body. Do you mind? Of course not, right? The trick is to turn what is a simultaneous game into a sequential one, and Boeing goes first. So we're going to unravel this. I'm going to use the same numbers, and the only difference is that Boeing is going to put a stake in the ground. There is a real life example of this. Back, someone by the name of Mike Baer were working with Boeing many years ago when they produced what eventually morphed into the 787 Dreamliner. Boeing says first, we're producing a narrow body. Put its stake in the ground. It goes first. Order matters. What then, if Boeing has chosen a narrow body, what is the best thing for Airbus to do? Well, these are the numbers exactly as I represented before. 4 possibilities. Think about what Boeing choosing a narrow body first does to Airbus. It essentially takes that portion of the decision tree off the table. Think about it again. Before, right here, Boeing could have produced a wide body or a narrow body. By choosing a narrow body, that whole branch of the decision tree is no longer relevant. Given that narrow body has been chosen by Boeing, given that, what's optimal for Airbus to do? Well, it can choose to have 1/3 of the market or 1/3 of the market here with 40 billion in sales, here with 12 billion in sales. What would you rather have? 1/3 of the market with 12 billion in sales, 1/3 of the market with 40 billion in sales. Now, of course, this is in part due to the way I've constructed it, but in principle, that's what we're trying to do. You take the bad options for your rival off the table. Here, Boeing, by going first, has taken and thought of all the things I don't want Airbus to do. How do I make it so they don't do that? How do we make what they do in our best interest? That's in principle what we're trying to do. It gets very elaborate. I'll show you in maybe 10 minutes as we wrap up the present part of this, an example of how complicated it can get. But think about working through all of the steps, taking all the logic to the right, finding that solution you want, and thinking about the first move at the beginning of the decision tree that will get you the biggest probability of getting to that outcome, and making sure that first move isn't the one that gets you to the bad outcomes. That's the intuition. Commitment, I've done this narrow body here. I've made that commitment. Credible threat is that this isn't on the table anymore. And so I want you to think about in your business, where does order matter? I'd argue most everything we do strategically, order matters. Okay, so in the last 10 minutes or so of this, let me go through a couple conclusions. It can be used at the macro, very strategic, and the micro tactical decisions. It's being demanded at the C-suite and board level. Commitment, credible threat, and order matters. 3 things. Waiting for a rival to go first and then responding is almost never an optimal strategy. Why? And the reason is that you can change the things that are the bad outcomes, take them off the table if you think out and logic out all of the future permutations of the market that may take place in practice. Unravel the game to determine the simultaneous to sequential when you can, and you have to think about what is in your best interest and how you get your rival to do that. Okay, let me build on this. So we have, maybe a little bit under 5 or 10 minutes left to go. I want to give an example of how we do it and show you how it plays out in practice in short order. Again, when we do this live and we have an entire day together, we go through all of these examples in much more depth, and then we use decision trees to your business or to a case so you actually get practice in doing this. Of course, in 45, 50 minutes, we don't have time to do that here, but hopefully at least some of the logic. And by the way, one thing I will say before we get into it a little bit is I don't mean to suggest that game theory is simple. It's not. But the intuition behind it is simple. It's nothing that anyone on this call can't do. It's just a matter of how complicated the situation gets, how much time you spend on it, and how much detail you go through. And I'll give you some examples before we close. All right. So I want to give one example. And this is going to be, you all remember Charlie Brown, hopefully. Those of you who don't, Charlie Brown wants to kick the football. His friend Lucy always pulls the football away right when he's about to kick it and he falls on his back. So let's see what happens here.
Never jump into a pile of leaves with a wet sucker. Say, Charlie Brown, I've got a football. How about practicing a few place kicks? I'll hold the ball and you come running and kick it. Oh, brother. I don't mind your dishonesty half as much as I mind your opinion of me. You must think I'm stupid. Oh, come on, Charlie Brown. No. I'll hold it steady.
Okay, so when we're live, I do this on the board. Think about the following. What is Charlie Brown's decision tree? He can do two things. First move is don't kick, and the other thing is kick. If he chooses not to kick, he doesn't get to do what he wants, kick the football. If he tries to kick, two things can happen. Lucy can pull the football out, or he gets to kick it. Clearly, his probability associated with Lucy pulling the football out is, I don't know what, 99%? He's almost certain. So if you think about A, the top of that decision tree, for Charlie Brown, don't kick, gets him not what he wants, but he doesn't look stupid. If he tries to kick with a 99% probability, he's going to look stupid. So what does he do? He doesn't kick. Now let's see what happens next, however.
No. Please. You just want me to come running up to kick that ball so you can pull it away and see me land flat on my back and kill myself. This time you can trust me. See, here's a signed document testifying that I promised not to pull it away. It is signed. It's a signed document. I guess if you have a signed document in your possession, you can't go wrong. This year, I'm really going to kick that football.
All right, note that that's a commitment device. Given that commitment device, what does it do to the decision tree I just talked about? I think most of you would realize it doesn't change the tree at all. It just changes the probabilities. Now, instead of a 99% probability that he's going to not get to kick the football and look like an idiot because he's going to pull the football out, that commitment device reverses the probabilities. Now he thinks, I don't know, maybe 98, 95%, he's actually going to get to kick the football. And so then what's optimal for him to do, given that new piece of information? It changes the probabilities, and what's optimal for him to do is go and try and kick the football. Let's see what happens.
Peculiar thing about this document, it was never notarized.
So note that. Would that work in a repeated game? Of course not. If it happened again, so one of the things you need to know is what kind of game are you in? Is it one-off? Is it a repeated game? Because what you do, Optim 101, that Golden Balls video, they're not going to play again those two. That wouldn't work a second time. So knowing the game you're playing and what works and the decision calculus arrival matters. All right. So with that, in the last few minutes, I have maybe take another 5 or so, and then we'll take questions. I'll give 2 real quick, real-life examples. Company World Kitchen, they've changed their name since, but they were under threat by a rival supplier who had threatened to increase prices 5-fold, a significant increase in price. And you may know them, don't know them, they know their brands. This is some of the World Kitchen brands. Pyrex, they had this Visions cookware that was produced by a single source, pyroceramic, produced in France. And the increase that they didn't want to pay, they had to decide how to respond using game theory methods. And there were 20 potential actions that they might take. And they actually split into 5 teams. Each of the 5 teams were given 4 potential strategic actions. So almost always when you do this in practice, think about what it is that you can do, not the things you think you should do, not the things you're likely to do. Literally list all the potential strategic actions you might take if it's a price increase. In this case, a response to a price increase. One is to cut off all business with this company. One would be to pay it. One would be to sue. One would be to negotiate. And there were 20 of them. So the very first thing you do is list your strategic actions out. In this case, I give you 4 of the 20. The second thing is assume you've done the first one. None of the others happen. Just assume you've done it. What are the things that your competitor might do? Not what you think they would do, not what you guess they will do, but literally all the things they potentially might do. Literally list them out. Then go to the second one. For that second one, what are all the things that if you do this, assume you did that second one, what are all of the things your rivals might do? And then for each of those, assess the probability of what they would do. And is that outcome good or bad for you? I know I went through that quickly. Like I said, when we do it live, you'll do it. So it becomes clear. List your actions, assume for each of the 20, one by one, what is the set, assuming you did that first one, what are the things your competitors might do? What's the probability they might do it? Subjective probabilities they are, but they're better than not doing it at all. By the way, this can get as advanced as you want. The probabilities can be with certainty. You can have a distribution around it. We can do Monte Carlo analysis. It can get complicated, but the intuition is identical. All right, and then we ultimately look at this good or bad. Now I'm going to show you the output of what they did. This is a draft part. This is each of the potential actions. Again, there are 5 teams. And note, color-coded in practice, we'd want to do it from, a range from 0 to 100 or whatever it may be. In this example here, red is bad, yellow is not very good, green means a good outcome. Well, if you notice, if we did this or this action, all of these potential competitive moves, there are no good outcomes. So we don't do those things. I keep it a little bit simplified here, but that's the intuition. You literally list through everything. For those things that at the end of that process, you end up with bad outcomes, we eliminate them from our consideration. We focus on those things where you have good outcomes with good probabilities. That's the Charlie Brown example applied. They're living and breathing documents. As we get more information, the numbers will change. The probabilities will change. We may take an outcome in or out. And so we can do this in practice, affecting what you ultimately do with thought. And when you present to the board, I'm going to leave you with this and then we'll open with questions. It can get as complicated as this. That's a real life example. I'm going to take this off for a second and I want to show you this example with the names changed. So none of this is revealed who this is. I'll keep it that way. But literally what I want you to do is look at this column and this column, but primarily this column. This is the Charlie Brown example on steroids. There are 3 competitors and the company that's doing the game theory analysis, they had a decision to make and report to the board in order to get approval. The top of this is if they decide to make the capital expenditure that they were going to the board for. The bottom of this is when they don't, all the potential outcomes. So watch these, just watch the colors. Again, green is good, that's pretty good, red is bad. As we go down, this is all if we go ahead and we do the capital expenditure we're asking. Now we're moving to the situation where we don't engage in that capital expenditure. Look what happens to all the colors as we move down. The colors get red increasingly. So if we do, we're all the way up here. So I'm going to take this off share. Actually, let me go off this. That's a really simplistic version of it, of course, but I'm going to go to this here. But that's in essence what we do. The board was shown the diagram literally as you go down, and the board could see that all the outcomes that we're predicting are bad if we don't engage in the capital expenditure. If we go down to the bottom, there are various good and bad outcomes, but clearly the outcome set is much better when we build versus not build. We spend versus not spend. And that's kind of what we're trying to do when we go through detailed game theory analyses. All right, now I know I'm over on the time. We're trying to end at 45 or 50 to allow time for questions. I know there are a lot in the chat. What you've gotten is a full-on 50-minute-ish version of what usually takes a day. So hopefully some of that intuition came across and hopefully it piqued your interest enough to think about how we actually do get from commitment, credible threat, order matters, the Charlie Brown decision tree to the end decision tree that gets that complicated when you have multiple competitors over a period of time. But that's the essence of what we're trying to do. So I'm going to get off the share here and open it up for questions. I know we have maybe 10 minutes or so, and I'm happy to stay on as long as you all want. I have time, you may not, but I want to be respectful of your time. So Kristen, I know there were tons in the chat, so I'm going to be quiet and see what I can do to you all. And make it hopefully less complicated.
This is
But
brilliant.
Kristen, I'll say just one thing. This is, to me, I get excited about this because it's real. It is something that can give you competitive advantage. And if it's taken apart from what seems to be complex to its core, there isn't a person on this call that can't do it and gains competitive advantage as a result.
Fantastic. I can feel your excitement and your energy, and I think we can too be, and as evidenced by the wonderful questions that we have in the chat. I think like learning through context is always very helpful. We have three wonderful questions about game theory in an industry, three different industries. So the first one I'm going to throw up is about big tech. The question is, we have a current case of a company not going first and perhaps making order matter. Apple has chosen to not go first in the AI battle. By letting the competition burn capital on investments that may not pay off, have they imposed order and gone first? It seems like a gamble, but they control the channel, so is not going first their advantage? Question mark.
A great question and great point. Notice when I said it is almost always optimal to go first. And there are a couple of exceptions. One would be if you have deep pockets and you have a lower cost structure than your rivals. You can let them go, burn out, and undercut them on price all day long because you have that cost advantage. So you don't want to be in a price war if you're not a low cost producer. That's one. The second is, and I'll use Amazon as an example, Apple is another. If you have the ability to exert capital spend in ways that others can't. I write a lot about in the second book Carrot and the Stick. I have a new one out recently that talks about something totally different. The Carrot and the Stick talks about how you use strategic control to gain competitive advantage. I would argue if you have the deep pockets of Apple, of any of the Magnificent Seven, you have that capital spend, you don't have to go first. You can pick the winner, and as Amazon often does, pick the winner and put them out of business, or pick the winner and bring them into the fold. So you've identified 100% correctly. I would not argue you'd ever want to do that if you were not an Apple, an Amazon, a NVIDIA, or any of the Mag 7. Great point.
Another industry specific one about big pharma. Big pharma pouring lots of money in investments in US manufacturing over the next couple of years in response to the geopolitical outlay currently and potential high tariffs. Can you comment on the implications for big pharma in the long term in the event geopolitics and tariffs shift significantly in the future? It feels like big pharma is placing more emphasis on short-term versus long-term strategy.
Oh, I love that. So one of the places where and we have a colleague at Yale that does this exclusively, but one of the area where game theory plays out in important ways is in geopolitics. How tariffs affect, when they affect, will they be in place, will they not? And a lot of the work that people try and do is to develop strategies that are robust to future states of the world. So if tariffs being announced stick, for example, or if requirements to produce and source on site inside the United States are required by law or not. All those institutional barriers as they play out over time are essentially a game theory. I think one of the things that the question points out, which is a really important one and is absolutely spot on, all too often we do this in the short run because we don't apply the long game to it. And if you think about what game theory tries to do, it plays out those permutations over time, working to the right back rather than that incremental step. And I think the question and the person who asked that question gets it spot on, it is indeed a response to now. Sometimes you have to survive now to get there in the long run, right? You don't have a long run if there isn't a short run. But no, I point well taken. I think in the long run, you have to think very carefully about where cost plays out and where requirements will play out. And you try and produce those strategies that don't depend on your prediction being right, that are robust to future states. Great point.
So on a personal level, and pivoting away from industries at large to and external forces to one-on-one engagement, how does buying food or coffee for someone at a meeting play into game theory? This
I
person
love it.
has observed that the person pays regardless of purpose or context of the meeting gets the upper hand or a sense of like starting the conversation with superiority. What do you think?
Great conversation. My colleague Zoe Chance has a book. I'd encourage you to get, and I'm not selling books here, so mind you. But Zoe is a great book, and it's based on, and you can go online and just Google, YouTube, whatever you want. There's a YouTube video, Caladini and Martin, The Science of Persuasion. And there's indeed a lot of evidence that the person who it's called reciprocity is the concept. And Zoe does this live in sessions at Yale and does it and talks about it in the book. But there's absolutely a lot of evidence that suggests the person who gives first, the second person has feels an obligation to reciprocate. And that's game theory at work. When I did my PhD at Cornell, Henry Wan Jr. studied game theory in a household. And he studies how two partners inside of a household can negotiate over deciding something. And remember, I talked about that once in public, and the guy in the front who was married says, "You mean you can do that?" I thought that was a funny response. But yeah, it can be applied absolutely at the personal level, and people actually study that. Henry's work was very mathematical, but pragmatically, it plays out every day, and reciprocity is one great example. So great observation. Agreed.
I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'll give a conclusion wrap up to our webinar. And then, with your generosity of time, I'll answer a few more questions. But I did want to do a bit of a wrap up for those who do have to leave at 12. The last question I want to ask, because I think it's a wonderful level set for what are the most important shifts in game theory over the last decade and what drove them?
Wow. So, so really good. So there, again, there's three levels: mathematical. Some very few, I think, academics and business people can do mathematical, empirical, and apply it. Again, I'll hold up Barry. I mentioned Barry a few times, my colleague, who is able to do it mathematically, empirically, and then in real life. I think most of the developments in the last probably 15 to 20 years has been not in the mathematical, though a lot has happened, not in the empirical side, although a lot has happened because I've been part of, maybe 12, 15 or so peer-reviewed papers that I published on that. But where the biggest changes have been made, I think, is in the kinds of things we talked about here today. The fact that it's become something that we actually can do. I'm very cautious of companies that will tell you, and I know of some, I won't mention them by name, that will tell you, we're going to come in, consult with you, do game theory, and we have a black box proprietary algorithm inside. Don't believe it. It's nothing more, it's complicated in most cases, but nothing more elaborate than that last big giant spreadsheet that I showed you with some Monte Carlo, some statistical analysis, and maybe some probability variance built in. But it's very similar to what's done there. You can do it. Doesn't mean that you don't need guidance to do it. And I'd argue that probably the biggest advance has been how do you do it in your own practice? And I'd argue, I know I'm going a little bit over Kristen, but the area where I believe the biggest change is going to come is in the last 15 years, but the next year and a half. How AI can do the work for us. We got to do the work and the homework, and we actually get a head start on what all strategic options are that we have available. For each strategic option, we can use various AI AI programs. I don't know if you like Gemini or Claude or OpenAI or whomever. For each of those, you can actually get at least an initial decision tree. You could use your judgment on there, but you can short circuit what that big giant diagram that I showed you before at the end, the big Excel spreadsheet. It took a team of 5, about 3.5, 4 months to present to the board. I'd argue you can probably cut that in 3.5 or 4 weeks at most with AI. And that's the biggest change that's happening. And that's the part that's most exciting because that makes it accessible to everyone.
Thank you, Bill. That's a wonderful note to end on, with things things for us to continue to explore. As I mentioned, we are at time, sadly, and you're going to stay on for a little bit longer, but I can see people starting to jump to their next meeting. So we're going to stay on for a couple more minutes, ask and answer a couple more questions. For those who have to leave, I just want to say thank you so much for giving us your time, for giving us your attention, for sharing with us your questions. As I mentioned, you're going to receive a follow-up email about more about game theory, more about Bill's research, just receive additional resources and learn more about the programs we've mentioned throughout the webinar. So look forward to that email hitting your inboxes soon. applications for both LBMI and YGALP are open and available. The holidays are an excellent time to reflect on what you'd like to do next, maybe learn more about game theory with us here at Yale, and craft a compelling application. So please let us know if you have any questions regarding either of those programs, either of those applications, or just the work we do here at Executive Education in general. So again, thank you for your time. Now, I'm going to come back and ask you a couple more questions, Bill.
Happy to.
Excellent. So we do have, there was this excellent question about the mention of excellent question about moving the board. So
Yeah.
would you agree to an extent that with game theory and moving the board that this could result in a new category of creation? I often find that it's warned against, but based on what you said and what you have shared, could it be possible if you balance that as macro long-term strategy with the micro strategy of confirmation to current categorization of your business? Could you gain ground and authority?
Yeah, so again, these are all really insightful questions and spot on. When we do this longer, I give an example of the Boeing, essentially the history of when it created the 787. It started with something called a Sonic Cruiser. And I alluded to it very briefly, but essentially what they did is a long game that was played over about 5 years, and it created a concept that they wanted and goaded, if you will, Airbus into producing the A380, which by and large has been unsuccessful in the marketplace. And so what I would argue in that case is an example of them actually changing the board. It used to be, how do you go head to head, like that the stylized payout matrix Boeing Airbus. This all of a sudden changed the dynamics. And the analogy to moving the board, I think, fits really well. I often liken it, if you do game theory, you're playing the equivalent of 3D chess or checkers when your competitor is playing it in 2 dimensions. And it gives you a huge advantage from it. So yeah, I think you have the ability to think of things, see it in a way that others don't. And I think sometimes I have a colleague, Drew Boyd, who has a book from a number of years back called Thinking Inside the Box, maybe 15 years old. I love the book because to your point about creating new opportunity, what he does with his co-author is look at how you think of things differently, recombine his example. And it's not quite a game theory example, but picking up on your question, what do you get when you take a contact lens, an ATM, and an exercise bike? What do they have in common? And what he says is they have all had what we used to think was an essential element taken out. Who would ever sell a bike with one wheel, right? Who would ever sell a pair of glasses without frames? That's the example. How do we think about things differently? And I do think game theory, although that isn't a game theory application, it does give you the ability to think of your markets differently and end up, in the case with Boeing, with what it ended up being the 787 Dreamliner. Great question.
Another question, and I'd love for you to parse this one out. If the choices are poor, can game theory help justify a right choice?
Great.
How?
I love these questions. Yeah, so two perspectives. One, I think it can give you the best of what all those choices may be. So I'm presuming when you say are the choices, meaning there aren't any great outcomes. I worked with a number of organizations using a combination of game theory and value chain analysis. What I talk about is strategic control points to divest from industries. Owens Corning in Windows, an example. Eastman Chemical divested one of the chemical additives that were used by Lexus and Toyota. And there are many examples that I've worked with companies to divest. I'd argue the way, again, not knowing the details in this case, but if you have a large number of alternatives, none of which give you a really good outcome, game theory can give you what the best outcome is, or at least what the most likely best outcomes are. And then from that, I would want to go back and look at the business case. I always say, and Boeing had a great way of viewing this, and I think they're 100% right in strategy, everything has to get past the strategic due diligence test. If it gets past the strategic due diligence test, then it gets to finance to see if it passes the financial due diligence and is it accretive to the bottom line. In this case, if I have a number of not great options, what's the best one? And does that pass whatever hurdle rate I need to make the decision at all? Or should I disinvest in the industry entirely. And those are the tough choices that we make now with some educated guesses. And they are, at the end of the day, only probabilities, hopefully not guesses, but probabilities, rather than flying blind. So it helps. It doesn't always give us the magic bullet answer. Great question.
Thank you. Have you ever modeled this out in healthcare, particularly around value-based care arrangements? Have you
So
ever had?
yes and no. I won't say the name of the company, but I'm currently working with one to look at clinical trials and use game theory applied to clinical trials inside of the broader portfolio that the company has. I haven't done it outside that area in healthcare. Would be really interesting. I think there's a great, certainly an applicability. But if you start to think about the game of what happens at the end of a clinical trials process, engaging in it to begin with, how do you decide on the staging, the sequencing, and whether or not you want to go that route at all? Is in part educated by game theory.
I'm going to pivot a bit for you, Bill. I love this question. Would neuroplasticity training help with mastering game theory?
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. It's funny. No, a lot of that. It's interesting. A lot of the recent work on anything from neural networks um, to the use of um, large language models to creative applications of what we do. Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh, you have given us so much time already. I recognize that we're approaching 10 after. I'd love for you to ask and answer one more question. Is that all right, Bill?
I'm going to actually do this. I'm going to answer one more question. Then I have my own question to answer that I saw pop up that I want to make sure I address. So,
Okay. Oh,
so
okay. All right.
uh, yours for the one you have, Kristen first.
Great. I have this one. I love this question. Can game theory be used to solve public sector problems, like to help end wars?
Yeah. Uh, Only if we could end all wars, right? With anything. Um, but yes, it's not an area that I do, but it is a very large field of which I know we have days in some of our Yale programs that focus on engagements using game theory. Game theory originally started, go back all the way back to Sun Tzu and the Art of War. In many ways, there are game theory lessons to be taken from that. And it started really World War One, mostly World War II, with work of John Nash and others in skirmishes, so battles, how you engage with each other, but also the long run geopolitics of how you avoid wars in the first place, how you settle disagreements. It is all game theory. And I always say in another life, if I had to do it over again, that's the part of game theory I would focus in on, because that's one, the most exciting in many ways, because it has a real outcome, and it's also a way you can make a real difference. So whether it be geopolitically or it be at the local level, how we decide on an outcome of what happens at a school board or a local town board, it's all game theory in action. Absolutely.
Thank
And
you.
then, Kristen, if I may, I'm going to ask the someone had popped up. I saw it briefly ask about AI moving forward. Exactly how might we use it? And I think that's something that I'm excited about, and I'm starting to work on. One that I think has the biggest potential impact moving forward. And one, you start to think about. Remember, I said before in that Charlie Brown example, he had two choices: build, in his case, kick or don't kick, or try and kick and don't kick. Often we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, in the case of World Kitchen, 20 options. Going first to generative AI to come up with that list, I went and spent a week for that company when we did the work with World Kitchen, interviewing senior execs. I don't need to do that anymore. We can actually have the decision trees built by AI to start. And I always believe you never stop with that, but it's a start. Second, once you develop that model, I just recently had some work on economic impact analysis that I did, and I fed a very elaborate Excel spreadsheet into Gemini Deep Research. And I was absolutely amazed at the pieces that I missed that it pointed out that I didn't get. Checking the logic. Are you sure this is correct? And it was. but the ability to not only help build, but use this as a premise and then double check what you did to see how things play out. AI is not only a time saver, but it can make you few places where game theory goes wrong is if you miss something. There's a strategic action you can take, you miss, or a rival could do something and you don't get it. Where I find that AI can do is sometimes it can catch things that you hadn't thought about before and make sure you don't miss those opportunities. So thanks everyone for listening. I appreciate your time. Hopefully it's been useful to everyone. I take this seriously, hence the tie. It's an hour and now an hour and 15 of your time. And cumulatively, that's something that I hope has been worth your time.
I concur. I've truly enjoyed our time together, and we do have so many more questions left in the Q&A. Bill, I will be sure to share them all with you so you can see what's coming down the line. I look forward to responding to them as best I can. Thank you, Bill, for your time. I really appreciated it, and thank you everyone for staying on the call with us and hearing more from your peers on the call and from Bill. So thank you again. I hope you have a great day, everyone.